Hello again. So let's look a little bit at learning objective 3 with a little bit more detail on applying EIR in practice with the CHEK toolkit. Of course, this presumes that you have watched the previous content on this learning objective, and some of the knowledge will be assumed to be known already, but let's dive a little bit deeper, and in some cases, let's clarify some aspects. So globally speaking, what we are going to speak about in this set of presentation is the first a little bit about the ISO 19650 part 2, then we'll dive into the exchange information requirements, but in the third part, we will look at a specific example that was prepared by Building Smart Portugal, also with the support of the CHEK project. And finally, what is the EIR in reality about when you go into the digital building permit contest. So in that context, we are going to speak about what we did in CHEK project to contribute to the specification of a EIR that will be apt for the digital building permit process. I mean, the submission. So first about the ISO 19650 part 2. So as you see here, there's a definition that is a transcription from the ISO. This document is designed to enable an appointing party to establish their requirements for information during the delivery phase of the assets and to provide the right commercial and collaborative environment within which multiple appointed parties can produce information in an effective and efficient manner. So this may look a little bit overwhelming at first, but it's basically establishing the rules of the game for the appointing parties. So many times this means the client or the owner. I mean many times because it's not necessarily always the owner, but most of the times it is. And this owner will establish the requirements for information and set the right commercial and collaborative environment for those that are providing the service of, for example, design, which are the appointed parties, will be able to produce information according to a standard and to be efficient, okay? So globally speaking, this is the setting of the rules of the game. So in many cases, as the notes say below, in many cases, the appointing party is actually the owner or client. So let's assume throughout the rest of the presentation that we have a single appointing party, which is the owner. It may not be the case in all situations, but this is in relatively complex projects. Then the delivery phase of the assets, actually, which is the name of the standard, if you look here on the right-hand side of the screen, it's ISO 19650 Part 2, and Part 2 means delivery phase of the assets. This relates to the stages of design and the stages of construction, even though on digital building permits, as the principle that we are doing here in CHEK, this regards to the design stage. Then the standard is setting actually several rules for the procurement, production, and approval of information, as mentioned before. And we are going to speak about the usual tools that we happen to have in this process, namely the EIR and the BEP. But let's dive into that as we go. So this is the information management in a simplified schematics of a hypothetical relationship between parties in a process according to ISO 19650. And this is just a little bit of a way to bring the jargon into a real example. So there would be thousands of possible combinations, I would even say in a small exaggeration, but all of these combinations of people and parties can be materialized through different ways, but we are going to single out a case. And the case that we have here is a case of a building owner who is the appointing party in this case, and the building owner is requiring information or hiring someone, which is a project coordinator here, named here, that will also play the role of the BIM manager or the information manager. So this person is being hired actually to sub-hire a set of designers in this scenario. And these designers are an architect, a structural engineer, an MEP engineer or hydraulic engineer, whatever you want to call it. So they are from different companies, they are being hired to produce the designs, and these designs are coordinated by this project coordinator, which in the schematics that I have here happens to be the BIM manager as well, and they will relate as a group to the building owner, which is actually the appointing party who hires the lead appointed party, and the lead appointed party has a relationship of information with the appointed parties, okay? So the difference is there's no lead, and the difference is appointing versus appointed, okay? This terminology is the jargon of ISO 19650. In many countries have their own original terminology, but for the management of information, we do use this terminology. This building owner will draft this specific document, which is the EIR. We'll speak a lot about that document, and you've already heard about it. The project coordinator or BIM manager will respond with a BIM execution plan that is drafted together with the appointed parties, and they will respond to the requirements of information of the EIR, and a lot of interaction will be happening. Of course, with the spirit of Open BIM, we are speaking here about logos of IFC and BCF and IDS, but these are standards of building smart, which you can also satisfy with the proprietary software, but for the flow of the digital building permits that we are defending in the CHEK project, this would be the IFC format. So information is being exchanged in the form of models, and these models are in the IFC format. Also, in the middle of all this, there's this CDE, the Common Data Environment, which is the cloud where we are storing information, but it's actually much more than a cloud. It's actually holding the information in a structured manner with a nomenclature that is checked, with workflows and with the authorizations, permissions. So there's a lot into that, and there's a way for the parties to relate within the CDE. And this is the overall view of what's happening according to ISO 19650 in a specific example of a building owner that is hiring a team to make the design. Okay, so this was just one concrete example, but at least we feel that many times for pedagogical purposes, it's better to provide a specific example rather than stay on the level of generality. So the concept of the EIR is the one that the owner needs to set so that, or the appointing party actually needs to set so that the appointed parties or the designers in this case will answer with the correct information that the owner requires. So let's see a little bit what is meant on the ISO 19650 series, what is meant by the EIR. And the EIR, according to ISO 19650 Part 1, which is the left-hand side, sets out the managerial, commercial, and technical aspects of producing project information. The managerial and commercial aspects should include the information standard and the production methods and the procedures to be implemented by the delivery team. In a very simplified way, the EIR is what the client wants in terms of information. And what the client wants in terms of information, or what the appointing party wants in terms of information, will be set according to a set of groups of things. And this group of things is a little bit more particularized in this right-hand side of the slide, where you see a small excerpt of ISO 19650 Part 2 in terms of its text, but only some selected parts. You see the 3 points many places. So it's in the stage of invitation to tender that the appointing party will establish the exchange information requirements. And for that purpose, there will be establishment of several things. And you see here the information requirements, the level of information need, the acceptance criteria for the information requirements, the supporting information, and the delivery milestones. So all of this is relatively general and a little bit ambiguous even. So we need more information to go deeper and to establish a EIR with care. So fortunately, there is documentation that helps us go in that direction, which are these two interesting guidances that exist that were issued in the scope of normalization committees, and particularly in Europe as well. So these reports are regarding the guidance on how to implement the ISO 19650 in Europe, and this one guideline for the implementation of EIRs and BEPs on European level based on the ISO 19650. So take into account the information that is in these documents and the previous information on the ISO 19650, it is possible to establish real EIRs that follow a certain set of rules and standards. And one of the important aspects of the EIR is to set out the strategic information requirements, which are normally called the organizational information requirements. And when we are going for the delivery stage, which is this right-hand side, it will pertain to the exchange information requirement for design, and you will have on top of the strategic information requirements, or OIR, organizational information requirements, you will have the project information requirements, and finally they will inform all of this together the EIR that you actually have to do. And if you are looking at the asset management purpose, you will have the asset information requirements and the EIR for the operational stage. So this will be not in the scope of this project. So on this project, we are looking at the design stage. And if you think of the design stage, you will be mainly looking at this part on the right-hand side, which is delivery, which is related to design and construction. This is not saying that the asset information management is not important. This is just saying that on the scope of this lecture, we are concentrated on this right-hand side. And this will be a set of jargon. The OIR, the PIR, and the EIR are sort of the reasons why we need information, and they will be explained in the EIR document that we will show to you. So this is just to set the stage that this terminology will not sound strange. So we will have different levels of the reason why we need information for our projects. And another thing that will be important in EIR is the level of information need. And by definition, the level of information need is, of course, initially defined in a very broad manner in the ISO 19650. And then there's a specific ISO, which is rather recent, the ISO 7817, which says that the level of information need is a framework which defines the extent and granularity of information to be exchanged. In accordance with this standard, the level of information need should be described by different concepts: geometrical information, alphanumerical information, and documentation. So in the standard, and this is a table that is adapted from the standard, you will have the requirement to set for your information that you are about to exchange, what you want in terms of geometry, what you want in terms of alphanumerical information, and what you want in terms of documentation. And there are things we need to satisfy, such as detail, dimensionality, location, appearance, and parametric behavior for the geometrical information. And for the alphanumerical information, you will follow data dictionaries or schemas of data in which you actually know what information you want on the non-graphical part of your asset. And finally, documentation, which is attached documents that you may bring. But this is just to let you know, once again, that this is standardized, and in the EIR that we are about to show you, this will exist already made as a table for those that are proficient in BIM, and they will be able to deliver BIM models that satisfy this information. So examples will be shown furthermore. So let's present how Building Smart created a EIR example. This is a particular effort of Building Smart Portugal, which was heavily supported by the CHEK project as well. And we could manage to produce a EIR that sets an example for the world in some way, because it was made originally in Portuguese, applied for a specific example, a concrete example in Lisbon, but then it was translated to English because it was felt that the value of what was made was good enough to share with the world, and there were not so many EIR examples in the world. So the reality here is that instead of being a EIR template, this is actually an EIR example. And the reason why we are showing you the link to Building Smart Portugal rather than telling you, okay, the document is in the e-learning platform, it's because it's a live document. So it's currently on version 1.1.2, which is in the late 2024, but it might expectedly be different as you check it, because we are constantly improving the document according to feedback from people that use it. And that's why also it's hosted in GitHub, which is typically where you share code and you share the evolution of your code. So this EIR example was created in this context. So we look at a building located in Lisbon that we want to build. We want to make the design for this building, and it's a 5-story multifamily housing, so with offices. It will be a private owner. This is for the design stage, and the purpose was to be compliant as much as possible with ISO 19650 Part 2, and at the same time simulate a well-informed private owner that knows what he wants and knows how to take benefit from BIM. And this was a document that was established by a relatively large committee of professionals in design and owners and even in construction. So the table of contents of what is a EIR has been set, and I haven't shown you. If you go back in this presentation or even in the contents, what I think was slide 7, there was on the right-hand side of the screen the contents of a EIR. So what you see here on the left right now is the same that you saw before, but now we only have part A and B, but the next ones will be in the next slides. So what we are trying to establish here is that everyone looking at this screen understands that the Building Smart Portugal EIR will contain the information requirements such as demanded by the ISO 19650, then the level of information need as demanded by the ISO 19650. And if we keep going, it will establish the acceptance criteria. So you see we are going on the table of contents downwards, and we are following the same structure that the actual ISO 19650 requests us for. And then we will have the support information with the reference information and share resources, which are things that are also mentioned here. And finally, the information delivery milestones and control points, which is also the last point that was mentioned in the ISO 19650. So taking into account those supporting documents, the best examples that we found online and with the experience of several companies, this was what was tailored. It's meant to be a very lean document in the sense that there's not so much talking and blah, blah, blah. It's a very short document, by the way, and it will contain only the necessary information so that the owner requires what the delivery team, meaning the designers in this case, and the BIM manager from the side of the appointed parties will need to deliver. So if we go a little bit in more detail in the Portugal EIR, we can go through the several sections. Of course, this is supposed to be a relatively small training video. It's supposed to give you a little bit of the map of what to be looking for. There are several things that will suppose that you have some degree of knowledge in BIM and in modeling and in the open standards of BIM. But regardless of that knowledge, you will understand that there's a clear structure, then there's clear information in every section. So I'm about to dive into the several sections of the EIR, but most of them I will just mention here they are, clear information about this, clear information about that for the sake of your time as well, but deepening will be relatively easy towards the reading out of the document. So first of all, and going to section number 2, because it's the first section that actually has content of direct interest, so after the introduction, you will have the information requirements, which includes the OIR, the organizational information requirements, the project information requirements, and then the next stage of exchange information requirements, which is not on this slide. But the OIR and the PIR are general information that is of upper level nature that will tell us first the OIR, the big policy of the company, what they are looking for. Then on the PIR is already for this type of project and for the scope of this project, what are we going after, and the regulatory compliance, sustainability. So we can see concrete examples of things that are normally mentioned in a very wide manner, okay, so on a very broad manner. So we are bringing concretization. And then scrolling down a little bit, we will have the phases of the project, in this case of the appointments, and the hiring process and the key decision points, which is also a very important jargon when we are speaking about delivery of information and checking on behalf of the appointing party and approval cycles with the several stages. And all of this is shown in detail in a concrete example in this EIR. Then also by recommendation of the ISO 19650, on the key decision points, what are actually the things that are being decided for, and then the plain language questions, which is even for the non-experts in BIM, what is meant by each decision point, and in these decision points, what needs to be answered. So here, it's just basically setting the stage for the actual information that will be necessary and explaining why this information is necessary. And then there will be finally what we call the actual exchange information requirements. So you will see a table that starts on EIR 01 and will go even further than in EIR 09. They are actually related to the PIRs, and they will satisfy certain requirements. So survey of the site, geological survey, modeling, model authoring, model coordination, validation, simulation of energy, etc. And there will be requirements that are related to this actually EIR references. So this will be found later on in the presentation. And finally, the level of information need on this chapter 2, which will, of course, in the scope of the EIR, will point towards an outside document. The outside document will be a spreadsheet with several tabs, and in each tab you will have, for a certain type of object or a certain type of entity, you will have the information requirements. For the sake of brevity, I will not go into too many details, but you see here an example of the level of information need for spaces, where you see the appointing party, the appointed party, so who is receiving and sending the information, and then you see the geometrical requirements and the alphanumerical requirements. There are no documentation requirements here, and then we see what we want for the several stages. And actually, in this case, this EIR is totally aligned with the schema of IFC in a non-national manner, meaning that this EIR was prepared to follow the schema of EFC without national determined parameters or national determined names of things. Okay, so it's following the schema of IFC, which we found it to be very interesting by doing a building smart EIR. And you will see that you have tables for general part, which will cover general things that will happen in all the parties of the project, the structural engineer, architect, etc. And then we'll have specific things for architecture, structures, and MEP. And of course, this is not truly complete, but it's a nice beacon on how to possibly do these things. Then going on the table of contents, we have the acceptance criteria, which will set the project information standards with standards, nomenclature, metadata of information. So here we have the standard for nomenclature, which in many cases is a mere translation of things that happen in the ISO 19650 already. For example, the nomenclature of files will be found in some national annexes of the ISO 19650, which is the case that will happen in Portugal, and this is what we are using for Portugal. But you will find that the information that you have here will be consistent with many ways of working in many countries, so this example will be transposable without almost any adaptation to other countries. So also the metadata of information containers, meaning that we are putting things in our common data environment, our cloud with benefits, if you say, and every single container or information container will have metadata that will tell you the status, revision, etc. And this is also standardized. Other things such as nomenclature of the information blocks, so for the objects. So in the case of Portugal, there was a manual for object nomenclature. This is even becoming outdated with ISO 22014, but we are in the process of updating our EIR, so this will be changing. And the unit system, the coordinate system, where there's a georeferencing, which is something very important in the scope of CHEK, and of course, in this case, we use, as it's a project in Lisbon, it's using the Portuguese georeferencing system, nothing too special. Classification system, we are using a national classification system, CHEK class. It could be UniClass, Uniformat, whatever, but it's being defined. The format and size of information containers we are providing in several, it's not totally translated there, but there are several information being shown about even the maximum kilobyte size of a given information container for it to keep within reasonable bounds. But we invite you to go through these documents to get further information. And then the software that will be required for the appointed parties as being OpenBIM EIR. We are not requiring any software, of course. Then telling about the platforms and software that the appointing party is using, if something is necessary for the asset management operational stage, which is not in this case. So this was a simplified EIR. In reality, this should be taken care. And methods and procedures for producing information. So how to capture information from existing assets, how to create, revise, and approve new information, the breakdown structure of IFC. So what is the spatial breakdown structure? What are the names that we are providing to the building storage, to the building, to the site, to the project? So all of that is being defined. The delivery of information of the appointing party. So the appointing party will be saying, we are using a certain CDE. So there would be a brand here in case there would be a proprietary one. Then a little bit about security. So this is a not restricted information project. So it follows the lowest classification ST4 for the security according to ISO 19650 part 5. Yet we found it interesting to bring some information about this in the EIR. And finally, the acceptance tables with a score on each EIR, what is to be accepted or not, and the criteria, how we will follow to check each criteria for general assessment, for coordinate system orientation, and you have a score for each information delivery, and that will allow quality control. Then on part 4, so we will add support information with reference information. You see several examples also following the nomenclature. We have a link and you can go for the information application, power of attorney, terms, insurance, urban land registry, topographic surveys, etc. These are the reference information. And then the share resources, which will give you, roughly speaking, templates, cover templates, reports, but also IDS files, which are also used in the scope of CHEK and can be extremely useful. So the last stretch would be the dates, information delivery milestones, and key decision points, which are tabled in a way that the EIR sets. So globally speaking, and this is the last slide about this example from Building Smart Portugal, what we intended to show to you is that this is structured in a relatively simple manner that even without a degree of specialization in BIM, one can actually read this document and understand what it is about. Of course, there are many things implicit to many of the written texts in the EIR that will carry the need to have properly trained and properly experienced people to do the process, of course. But at the end of the day, the municipalities, even if they are not experienced and trained in BIM, they can understand that owners are giving this kind of document to designers or to BIM coordinators so that they can then satisfy these information requirements and then they can provide this back to owners. So there's a big power here because if I am an owner or an appointing party and I know that eventually I will have to apply at the municipality for a digital building permit, I might as well be well informed by the municipality, hey, like the lady here, hey, we have certain requirements so that the BIM model can be submitted to our municipality. So if you are doing an EIR, we will tell you what are the specificities that for our municipality and for our way of receiving the information in the models, in this case in IFC format, what do you need to satisfy so that your process will be smooth when you come to the municipality. So then the appointing party, the owner, will have something sort of to copy and paste or at least to analyze carefully and to tell designers, hey, we are going to deliver this to this specific municipality. So let's follow this. On the other way, there's the possibility the owner or the appointing party is not really BIM proficient. This person doesn't have a clue what is a EIR, and in many cases, people will not know. Normal owners, like you're a private person, private owner of a plot and you want to build a house, and you are nothing related to construction in terms of your profession or your knowledge, and you will just hire some architect or project manager to, hey, I want to make the designs of my house, whatever. And I don't know anything, but the architect or this project manager will know that the municipality has certain EIR requirements. So that person will look for the municipality information and they will make sure that regardless of the owner having no clue about information requirements, they will actually comply to them. So it's not only about the picture that we are showing on screen right now, but it's about much more that people will be informed of what the digital building permit application will need. So this is pretty much the graphic that I've shown you before. So you see here on the right-hand side, this is repeated information. The appointing party is hiring someone, the lead appointed party, to take care of the project coordination, which will hire all the designers. They will have an IFC at the end, but the EIR that the building owner is actually issuing will be informed by the CHEK EIR. So this is exactly what the next part is about, is one of the important deliverables of CHEK, which tells us for a specific case, and in this case it's one of the members of our project where case studies are being made, which is the municipality of Ascoli Piceno in Italy, and the CHEK EIR was made for the case of Ascoli Piceno. This is a public document that the CHEK project has made available, and it will provide with an example of what was made for Ascoli Piceno in terms of information requirements, and actually based on the type of table of contents that you can find in the example EIR from Building Smart Portugal, you can find which are the parts that actually the municipality will be requiring so that the CHEK toolkit can operate here. And this is a very interesting degree of concretization, meaning that we are not leaving much to the imagination. We are just showing how it can be done if we are going in this direction. Okay, so that's what we have. So on the CHEK EIR, only some parts of the EIR are defined, meaning that not all the parts need definitions from the municipality. So we created the project information requirements regulatory compliance that regards to the necessity on the EIR 01 to apply for a digital building permit. So the actual owner will have this in the EIR. And then on the level of information need, there were several requirements that are necessary so that this model that is not created in a very artificial manner, so the model is worked as business as usual. So architects will keep their life as usual if they do correct information management and correct preparation of BIM models, and they actually know how to satisfy owners. They will realize, and hopefully they will realize, I mean, because CHEK was making a lot of effort for that, that modeling for submitting to digital building permits will not provide them with more effort. They will just have some extra requirements that are easy to meet and that will be repeated throughout projects. So first time, a little bit of implementation, then this will be relatively easy when it becomes business as usual. I would say even easier than the current processes. So of course, there will be tables of level of information need, and this is an example for the level of information need for the building, for the IFC building, which is the great entity that will tell you what is the building about. And then on the acceptance criteria, the project information standards. So several things like what you are going to satisfy, the nomenclature, the units, many of these are even similar to the existing EIR from Building Smart Portugal. But for example, the coordinate system will be different because it relates to a different place, and classification system may be different according to the destination place. So you will see these adaptations in this EIR. And also in the way information is produced, that containers may be separate between the plot and the surrounding construction, or the plot and the construction in the plot, and you will need to use the disaggregation of IFC with the IFC building and all the IFC site, and all of this is explained throughout the human readable text, as I normally say. And finally, on the acceptance tables, there's one very interesting thing that is one of the very interesting tools that was developed within the CHEK project, which is the CHEK IFC georeferencing tool. So you actually produce the IFC model to be submitted for the digital building permit process, and this CHEK IFC georeferencing will allow you to see on the city if your plot is in the correct place, for example. So many of these things start to be easier and easier as projects like CHEK are paving out the way. Of course, much has to be done, but I would say that globally speaking, and going to the conclusion slide of this presentation, globally speaking, what we are looking at is the requirements that these new standards for BIM are setting to us are being satisfied and met by these efforts of this digital building permits CHEK project, and you are now receiving the industry standard of the future, I would say, but in many cases is being applied right now, and to smoothen this transition so that municipalities and even owners and designers can understand that this is not the end of the world. This is actually a transition, and we must make it as smooth as possible and satisfy the requirements that we are actually setting for this new market of the future. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.